Sarah Martinez walked through the crowded shopping mall, her small frame moving quietly between groups of teenagers and families. At first glance, she looked like any other woman in her 30s. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore comfortable jeans and sneakers. Nothing about her appearance suggested the incredible training and experience hidden beneath her calm exterior. The afternoon sun streamed through the mall's skylights as Sarah made her way toward the electronics store. She needed a new phone charger, something simple that should take only a few minutes. Behind her, 3 young men had been following her for the past 10 minutes, though Sarah had noticed them almost immediately. Her training had taught her to be aware of everything around her, even during the most ordinary activities. The men thought they were being clever. They whispered among themselves, pointing at Sarah's purse and making crude jokes about how easy their target looked. The tallest one, wearing a baseball cap backwards, seemed to be their leader. He had been in and out of trouble with the law since he was 16, mostly for petty theft and harassment. His 2 friends followed his lead, thinking this would be another easy score. Sarah continued walking, her pace steady and unhurried. She could hear their footsteps getting closer, could sense their growing confidence as they prepared to make their move. What they didn't know was that Sarah had served 8 years as a Navy SEAL, one of the first women to complete the grueling training program. She had completed 3 tours of duty in some of the world's most dangerous locations, where staying alert meant staying alive. The electronics store was just ahead, but the corridor leading to it was less crowded. Sarah knew this was likely where they would make their move. She had dealt with situations like this before, though usually in much more serious circumstances. Her training had taught her to assess threats quickly and respond with exactly the right amount of force needed for each situation. As she approached a quieter section near the store entrance, Sarah could hear the men's whispered plans becoming more urgent. They had decided this was their moment. The leader gestured to his friends, and they began to spread out slightly, trying to surround her. Their amateur attempt at strategy would have been laughable to someone with Sarah's experience, but she remained focused and calm. Sarah slowed her pace just slightly, appearing to look at something in a store window. This gave her a better view of their positions in the reflection. She counted 3 targets, noted their approximate heights and builds, and identified which one was likely carrying a weapon based on the way he kept touching his jacket pocket. All of this information processed through her mind in seconds, the result of years of training that had become second nature. The men were close now, close enough that she could hear their heavy breathing and smell the cheap cologne one of them had doused himself with. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared herself. She had hoped they would lose interest and move on, but it was clear they had committed to their course of action. What happened next would depend entirely on how they chose to approach her. The mall's background noise continued around them, children laughing, music playing from various stores, the general buzz of afternoon shoppers. None of the other people nearby had any idea what was about to unfold. To them, it looked like just another ordinary day at the shopping center. They had no way of knowing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. The attack came suddenly and without warning. The leader of the group rushed forward and shoved Sarah hard from behind, expecting her to stumble forward and drop her purse. His plan was simple: grab the bag and run while she was confused and off balance. His friends were positioned to block her path if she tried to chase them, but Sarah didn't react the way they expected. Instead of stumbling forward, she used the momentum from the push to spin around in one fluid motion. Her body moved with a grace and control that seemed almost impossible. In the split second it took her to turn, she had already assessed the threat level and decided on her response. The young man who had pushed her found himself staring into eyes that were completely different from what he had expected. These weren't the frightened, confused eyes of a victim. They were calm, focused, and held a depth of experience that made him suddenly very uncomfortable. For the first time since planning this attack, he felt a flutter of doubt in his stomach. Sarah's voice was quiet, but carried an unmistakable authority when she spoke. "You really don't want to do this," she said, her tone neither threatening nor pleading. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of. "Walk away now and we can all pretend this never happened." The 3 men exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't going according to plan. Their target was supposed to be scared, supposed to hand over her purse and beg them not to hurt her. Instead, she stood perfectly balanced, completely relaxed, and seemed more concerned for their well-being than her own. The leader felt his confidence wavering, but his pride wouldn't let him back down in front of his friends. "Listen, lady, just give us the purse and nobody gets hurt," he said, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked slightly, betraying his growing nervousness. He reached into his jacket pocket, letting Sarah see the outline of what appeared to be a knife handle. "We're not playing games here." Sarah's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. To the untrained eye, she still looked relaxed and non-threatening. But every muscle in her body was now coiled and ready for action. She had identified the weapon, calculated the distance between herself and each attacker, and planned her response sequence. All of this happened in less than 2 seconds. "Neither am I," Sarah replied calmly. Her years of training had taught her that sometimes the best way to end a confrontation was to demonstrate just enough capability to make the attackers reconsider their choices. She took a small step forward, and something in the way she moved made all 3 men instinctively step back. The second attacker, who had been trying to circle around behind her, suddenly found that Sarah had shifted position to keep all 3 of them in her line of sight. She had moved so smoothly that he wasn't even sure how it had happened. The confident smirk he had been wearing began to fade as he realized this woman was tracking all of their movements simultaneously. A small crowd of shoppers had begun to notice the confrontation, though most assumed it was just a heated conversation between people who knew each other. An elderly man with a walking cane paused nearby, sensing that something wasn't quite right. A mother with 2 young children hurried past, instinctively pulling her kids closer to her side. The leader of the group was becoming increasingly agitated. Nothing about this situation was going the way he had planned, and he could feel control slipping away from him. His friends were looking to him for guidance, but he had no idea what to do next. The woman in front of him seemed completely unafraid, and that fact was more unsettling than any threat or show of force could have been. Sarah remained perfectly still, waiting to see what choice they would make. She hoped they would be smart enough to walk away, but she was prepared for any possibility. Her training had taught her that most confrontations could be resolved without violence if handled correctly. But she also knew that some people would only respond to a demonstration of superior capability. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The leader of the group made his fatal mistake when he decided that this small woman couldn't possibly be as dangerous as his instincts were telling him. Fueled by embarrassment and the need to save face in front of his friends, he pulled the knife from his jacket pocket and took a threatening step toward Sarah. "Last chance, lady. The purse now," he demanded, waving the blade in what he thought was an intimidating manner. He had used this tactic successfully several times before, and it had always worked. People saw the knife and immediately became cooperative. He expected the same result this time. Sarah's eyes flicked to the weapon for just a fraction of a second, long enough to assess its size and the way he was holding it. It was a cheap folding knife, probably picked up at a gas station. The way he gripped it told her that he had never been trained in knife fighting. This was someone who relied on the fear factor of the blade rather than any real skill in using it. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion, though it actually took less than 3 seconds. Sarah moved with a speed and precision that left the attackers stunned and confused. She stepped forward and to the side, moving inside the arc of the knife before the leader could react. Her left hand captured his wrist, controlling the weapon, while her right hand struck a precise pressure point on his forearm. The knife clattered to the floor as the leader's hand went completely numb. Before he could process what had happened, Sarah had used his own momentum to spin him around and apply a control hold that left him completely helpless. He found himself face down on the mall floor, with his arm twisted behind his back in a position that was uncomfortable but not quite painful enough to cause injury. The second attacker, seeing his friend subdued so quickly, decided to rush Sarah from the side. This proved to be another serious miscalculation. Without releasing her hold on the first man, Sarah used her leg to sweep the second attacker's feet out from under him. He hit the ground hard, all the air rushing out of his lungs as he landed flat on his back. The third member of the group, who had been hanging back, suddenly realized that he wanted no part of whatever was happening. He turned and ran toward the mall exit, abandoning his friends without a second thought. His footsteps echoed through the corridor as he fled, drawing more attention from nearby shoppers who were now beginning to understand that something serious was taking place. Mall security had been alerted by concerned shoppers, and was already on the way. The sound of their radios could be heard getting closer as they coordinated their response. Sarah maintained her position, keeping both attackers controlled and secure while they waited for backup to arrive. Her breathing remained steady and calm, as if subduing two armed attackers was just another ordinary task. The leader of the group was having difficulty processing what had just happened to him. One moment he had been in control, holding a weapon and making demands. The next moment, he was on the ground, completely helpless, held in place by someone, half his size, who didn't even seem to be exerting much effort. He tried to struggle against her hold but quickly discovered that any movement only made his position more uncomfortable. How? How did you do that? The second attacker gasped, still trying to catch his breath from his hard landing. He looked up at Sarah with a mixture of fear and amazement. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for encountering someone with this level of skill and training. Sarah looked down at him with something that might have been sympathy. 8 years in the Navy SEALs, she said simply. You picked the wrong person to mess with today. Her voice carried no anger or satisfaction, just a matter-of-fact statement about the reality of the situation. The sound of approaching security guards grew louder, and Sarah could see a small crowd of shoppers gathering at a safe distance. Some were taking pictures with their phones while others were calling 911 to report what they had witnessed. The ordinary shopping trip had turned into something that these people would be talking about for years to come. As the security team rounded the corner, Sarah prepared to hand over the two attackers and explain what had happened. She knew there would be questions, paperwork, and probably some media attention once word got out about what had occurred. The mall security team arrived to find a scene they had never encountered before. 3 uniformed guards approached cautiously, unsure of what they were walking into. They saw 2 young men on the ground, one being held in a professional restraint position by a calm woman who didn't look like she belonged in this situation at all. "Ma'am, are you all right?" asked the head of security, a former police officer named Mike Rodriguez. He had worked mall security for 5 years and had seen plenty of incidents, but nothing quite like this. The woman holding down the attacker looked completely composed, as if this was just another day at the office. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, maintaining her hold on the leader while keeping an eye on the second attacker. "These 3 men attempted to rob me. One of them had a knife." She nodded toward the weapon that still lay on the floor a few feet away. "The third one ran toward the north exit about 2 minutes ago." Mike radioed his team to search for the fleeing suspect while he tried to piece together what had happened. The 2 men on the ground looked like they had been through a tornado, while their supposed victim appeared completely unharmed and in total control of the situation. It was unlike anything he had seen in his years of law enforcement. "How did you manage to subdue both of them?" Mike asked, genuinely curious. He could see that the restraint hold Sarah was using was textbook perfect, applied with just enough pressure to maintain control without causing injury. This wasn't something an ordinary person would know how to do. "Military training," Sarah answered simply. She didn't elaborate, and something in her tone suggested that further questions along those lines wouldn't be welcome. Mike nodded and focused on securing the scene while they waited for police to arrive. By this time, a significant crowd had gathered. Word was spreading quickly through the mall that something incredible had happened. Shoppers who had witnessed the incident were describing it to others, and with each retelling, the story became more dramatic. Social media posts were already appearing, with shaky cell phone videos of the aftermath going viral within minutes. The leader of the failed robbery attempt was still trying to comprehend his situation. He had gone from predator to prey in a matter of seconds, and the complete reversal of power was deeply unsettling. "You could have just given us the money," he muttered, his voice muffled by his position on the floor. Nobody had to get hurt. Sarah's response was measured and calm. "You made the choice to threaten violence," she said. "I simply responded appropriately to the threat you presented. This outcome was entirely preventable if you had made different decisions." The second attacker, still sitting on the ground where he had landed, shook his head in disbelief. "We had no idea," he said, speaking to no one in particular. "She looked so normal, so easy." He was beginning to realize how badly they had misjudged their target, and the weight of that mistake was settling in. Police sirens could be heard in the distance, growing closer by the minute. Mall management had arrived on the scene as well, concerned about the incident and its potential impact on their business. The mall manager, a nervous man in his 50s, kept asking if anyone needed medical attention and whether the situation was fully under control. Sarah began to explain the sequence of events to Mike, who was taking detailed notes for his report. She described how the men had followed her, the nature of their attack, and her response. Her account was precise and factual, delivered without emotion or embellishment. Mike found himself impressed by her clarity and professionalism under what most people would consider stressful circumstances. "Have you ever had to use your training like this before?" Mike asked, unable to contain his curiosity about this remarkable woman who had just neutralized an armed robbery attempt with apparent ease. Sarah paused for a moment before answering. "This was actually pretty routine compared to some situations I've been in," she said quietly. "The main difference is that today I was shopping for a phone charger instead of defending a forward operating base." The approaching police sirens grew louder, and Sarah knew that the next phase of this incident was about to begin. There would be statements to give, reports to file, and probably media attention to deal with. All she had wanted was to buy a simple phone charger, but instead, she had become the center of a story that would be told and retold countless times. Detective Lisa Chen arrived at the mall with 2 patrol officers, expecting to investigate a routine robbery attempt. What she found instead was a crowd of excited shoppers, security footage that would soon go viral, and a suspect detention that had been handled with military precision by the intended victim. "I'm Detective Chen," she introduced herself to Sarah. "I understand you were the target of an attempted robbery?" Lisa had 20 years of experience in law enforcement, but she could immediately tell that this case was going to be anything but routine. The composure of the woman in front of her suggested someone with significant training and experience. Sarah finally released her hold on the first attacker, allowing the patrol officers to take him into custody. She stood up and dusted off her hands, her movement still controlled and purposeful. "Yes, Detective. 3 men attempted to rob me. I defended myself using reasonable force appropriate to the threat they presented." The police officers were processing the 2 suspects, reading them their rights and checking them for injuries. Despite the dramatic nature of their takedown, both men were essentially unharmed. Sarah's training had taught her how to neutralize threats without causing unnecessary injury, a skill that impressed the responding officers. Detective Chen reviewed the security footage on a tablet provided by mall management. The video clearly showed the 3 men following Sarah, the unprovoked attack from behind, and Sarah's lightning-fast response. What struck Chen most was how controlled and measured Sarah's actions appeared on camera. There was no excess force, no anger, just efficient and professional neutralization of the threat. "Ma'am, I have to ask, what's your background?" Detective Chen inquired. "The way you handled this situation suggests significant training." She had dealt with former military personnel before and recognized the signs of professional combat. "Training? I served 8 years as a Navy SEAL," Sarah replied. "I completed 3 combat deployments before leaving the service last year." She provided this information matter-of-factly, without pride or boasting. To her, it was simply relevant background that explained her capabilities. The detective's eyebrows raised slightly. She knew that female Navy SEALs were extremely rare, representing some of the most elite military personnel in the world. Meeting one in person, especially under these circumstances, was remarkable. "That explains a lot," Chen said with obvious respect in her voice. Word of Sarah's military background spread quickly through the crowd of onlookers. The story was evolving from a simple robbery attempt into something much more significant. People began taking more pictures and videos, and local news crews were already being dispatched to cover the story. The 2 suspects were providing very different accounts of what had happened. The leader was claiming that Sarah had used excessive force and that they hadn't really intended to hurt anyone. The second attacker was more honest, admitting that they had targeted her specifically and that the knife had been real. Their conflicting stories would make the prosecution's job easier. "Will there be charges against me?" Sarah asked the detective. She knew that self-defense laws varied by state, and she wanted to understand her legal position. Her response had been measured and appropriate, but she also knew that legal systems didn't always recognize the reality of combat situations. Detective Chen shook her head. "Based on the video evidence and witness statements, this appears to be a clear case of justified self-defense." You were attacked with a weapon and responded with appropriate force to protect yourself. No charges will be filed against you. Mall management was dealing with the growing crowd and media attention. The incident was already trending on social media under hashtags like Free Navy SEAL Mom and Yin Wrong Target. The story was being picked up by news outlets across the country, and Sarah's anonymity was rapidly disappearing. Sarah's phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and text messages from friends and family who had seen the social media posts. Word was spreading through her former military networks as well, with fellow veterans reaching out to congratulate her and express their pride in how she had handled the situation. "Is there anything else you need from me, Detective?" Sarah asked. She was anxious to leave the mall and return to her normal routine, though she suspected that normal might be difficult to achieve for a while. The attention was uncomfortable for someone who had spent her military career operating in the shadows. Detective Chen finished her notes and handed Sarah a business card. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to sign your formal statement, but that should be all we need. You handled this situation perfectly, and I want you to know that." As the police finished processing the scene and began to clear the crowd, Sarah finally had a chance to complete her original mission. She walked into the electronics store and purchased the phone charger she had come for, an ordinary transaction that felt surreal after everything that had just happened. Within 24 hours, Sarah Martinez had become a national news story. The security footage from the mall had been viewed millions of times online, and news outlets across the country were running segments about the Navy SEAL who had turned the tables on her attackers. Sarah's phone hadn't stopped ringing with interview requests from major television networks and newspapers. The story resonated with people on multiple levels. For many, it was satisfying to see criminals face immediate consequences for their actions. For others, Sarah represented the strength and capability of women in combat roles. Veterans appreciated seeing proper training put to good use in civilian life. The combination of factors made the story impossible to ignore. Sarah had reluctantly agreed to one television interview with a respected news program, hoping that speaking publicly might help reduce the constant media attention. Sitting across from the veteran journalist, she explained her perspective on what had happened and her transition from military to civilian life. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Sarah told the interviewer. "My training taught me to use exactly the amount of force necessary to neutralize a threat, nothing more. Those young men made poor choices, but I hope they can learn from this experience and make better decisions in the future." The two attackers who had been arrested were facing charges of attempted armed robbery and assault. The third suspect, who had fled the scene, had been caught 2 days later and was facing similar charges. Their public defender had initially considered arguing that Sarah had used excessive force, but the video evidence made such a defense impossible. In an unexpected development, the leader of the group had asked to meet with Sarah while he was in jail awaiting trial. Against the advice of the prosecutor, Sarah agreed to the meeting. She wanted to understand what had motivated the attack and whether there was something positive that could come from the incident. The meeting took place in the jail's visitor room, with a guard present and thick glass separating them. The young man looked very different from the confident criminal who had attacked her in the mall. He seemed smaller, younger, and deeply troubled by what had happened. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We never thought, we had no idea who you were or what you could do. We just saw someone we thought would be an easy target." He struggled to find the right words to express his regret. Sarah listened carefully before responding. "The problem wasn't that you picked the wrong target," she said firmly. "The problem was that you decided to target anyone at all. What you did was wrong regardless of who your victim was supposed to be." The conversation continued for almost an hour, with Sarah trying to help the young man understand the broader implications of his choices. She talked about the impact of crime on communities, the importance of finding legal ways to solve problems, and the opportunities available to people willing to work for them. By the time Sarah left the jail, she had made a decision that would change her life again. She realized that her unique combination of military experience and public attention gave her a platform to make a positive difference. She began speaking at schools and community centers about making good choices and the importance of service to others. The incident also led to Sarah being offered a position with a nonprofit organization that helped veterans transition to civilian careers. Her experience, both military and recent, made her uniquely qualified to help other former service members navigate the challenges of civilian life. 6 months after the mall incident, Sarah received a letter from the young man who had attacked her. He was participating in a rehabilitation program while serving his sentence and wanted to update her on his progress. He had earned his GED and was planning to enroll in community college courses when he was released. The mall where the incident occurred had installed a plaque near the electronics store commemorating the event and honoring Sarah's service. Mall management reported that the incident had actually increased foot traffic, with visitors hoping to see where the famous confrontation had taken place. Sarah's life had been forever changed by those few seconds in a shopping mall corridor. What started as a simple errand had evolved into a national conversation about crime, self-defense, military training, and second chances. She had found a new mission in civilian life, one that allowed her to continue serving others in a different but equally meaningful way. Looking back on that day, Sarah reflected on how unpredictable life could be. She had gone to the mall to buy a phone charger and ended up becoming an unlikely symbol of preparedness, strength, and the importance of making good choices. The three young men had learned that appearances can be deceiving and that actions have consequences, lessons that would serve them well for the rest of their lives.